I worked since 15, paid for college, and bought my first home at 24, only for my parents to sue me for 60% of its value, claiming I stole my brother's future. The shock wasn't just the lawsuit, it was learning they'd been siphoning my earnings into a secret gambling ring, betraying the family I thought I knew. When I picture childhood, I still see that sunny cul-de-sac in Spokane where everything looked perfect on the outside, the tidy flower beds, the friendly waves from neighbors walking dogs, the hum of sprinklers on summer mornings. Our house, a weathered two-story with blue shutters and a tire swing in the front yard, always smelled like cinnamon and old books. From a distance, it was the kind of place you might imagine as the backdrop for a feel-good commercial. And maybe, for a while, it was. My name's Ellie, and I grew up thinking I was lucky. Mom, Susan, worked part-time at the public library. She wore knit cardigans year-round and smelled like coffee and lavender hand lotion. She loved baking when she was in a good mood, chewy chocolate chip cookies, her specialty, and when she wasn't, she cleaned obsessively, like scrubbing the counters could erase whatever was bothering her. Dad, Greg, taught high school chemistry. He coached my soccer team in elementary school and used to lift me up on his shoulders when we went to the fair. My younger brother, Mason, was born when I was 7. He was a chubby, wide-eyed baby who grew into a sharp, quiet kid always glued to a screen. Even back then, everyone said he was gifted. "That boy's going to build the next Google," Dad would say proudly. A real brain. I didn't resent it. Not at first. I was the artsy one, the doodler, the storyteller. I liked making paper dragons and painting on rocks. No one said I was a genius, but they laughed at my jokes and let me decorate the fridge with my drawings. That felt like enough. Sundays were my favorite. We made pancakes, always with smiley faces, and watched old movies. Dad would pick 80s classics, Mom made snarky commentary, and Mason and I curled under the same worn-out blanket. On those mornings, it was easy to believe we were just like any other happy family. Even when I heard my parents arguing late at night about overdue bills or credit card debt, I told myself it was normal. Everyone fights sometimes. I ignored how Mason's school awards ended up in framed photos on the mantel, while my drawings were quietly taken down after a few days. I pretended not to notice that Mom never came to my school art shows, always saying she had a migraine or had to work late. When I won a local poetry contest in middle school, I left the ribbon on the kitchen counter. It disappeared the next day. No one mentioned it. But still, I told myself they loved me. I mean, they bought me art supplies every Christmas. Not the fancy brands, sure, but still. Dad drove me to soccer even when he was tired. Mom once helped me build a papier-mâché volcano. And every birthday, I got exactly one gift, wrapped in leftover holiday paper, with a simple note, "To Ellie, keep creating." It wasn't perfect, but it was home. In 9th grade, I designed a hand-painted mural on my bedroom wall, a forest filled with glowing animals and silver stars. It took me 3 weekends, and I remember standing back, looking at it, heart swelling. I brought Mom upstairs to see it. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "That's permanent, you know. Might lower resale value." Then she left. Still, I clung to the good parts. Like when Dad helped Mason build a computer from scratch in the garage. I watched them, thinking, maybe someday they'll do something like that with me. I offered once, "Want to see the comic I made for Mason's birthday?" But Dad just said, "Later, hon. We're troubleshooting." There was always a later. I brushed it off. I kept smiling. I kept drawing. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, impressed them enough, they'd see I mattered too. I wasn't looking for applause. Just recognition. At night, I'd sketch under the covers by flashlight, dreaming of my name on a children's book cover, or painting murals in big cities, or maybe even running my own gallery. I whispered those dreams into my pillow like they were secrets too fragile for daylight. Looking back, I realize now, I was already learning how to survive without anyone rooting for me. Already learning that love, in our house, was conditional. That Mason's achievements were currency, and my creativity was a hobby at best, a distraction at worst. But, at the time, I still thought they cared. I still thought if I could just be useful enough, quiet enough, responsible enough, maybe they'd look at me the way they looked at Mason. Maybe I'd finally earn my place in my own family. I got my first job when I was 15. Brew Haven was this cozy little cafe on Main Street with hanging plants, indie playlists, and chalkboard menus. They let me work weekends and some weekday afternoons, just cashiering and wiping down tables at first, but I loved it. I'd never had a space that felt so different from home, where people actually looked me in the eye and said, "Good job," like they meant it. On the day I got my first paycheck, I was practically vibrating. It was only $126.84 after taxes, but I stared at that stub like it was gold. I'd worked for that. Me. Not for school credit. Not for praise. Just me and my time, turned into something real. I already had a plan. Half into my college savings, half to buy better drawing pens and a sturdy sketchpad. Maybe even sneak in a mocha from work. When I showed the check to my dad, I expected a high five. Maybe a nice hustle, kid. Instead, he barely glanced at it and said, "All right, 20%. I blinked. "What?" "For the household," he said. "Electricity, food, water. You live here, don't you?" I thought he was joking. But then he folded the check and handed it back, eyes already on the TV. "You're not a freeloader, are you?" I forced a smile and said, "Right. Of course." Mom just said, "Don't forget Mason needs new running shoes." That night, I sat on my bed holding that wrinkled check, heart thudding. I'd worked 30 hours that week, walked to and from the cafe in freezing rain, missed a quiz review session, and they wanted rent? I told myself they were just trying to teach responsibility, that it was a good life lesson, that it wasn't personal. But then came the second check. And the third. And every single time, Dad took his cut, not from my hand, but through guilt. He'd say things like, "You like living under this roof, right?" Or "Mason's laptop wasn't free, you know." I started budgeting around it. Quietly. Secretly. I opened a hidden savings account at a credit union 2 bus rides away. I deposit my 20 there after every shift, praying no one would notice. I wasn't just saving for college anymore. I was saving for an exit. Meanwhile, Mason turned 14 and got enrolled in a pricey online coding bootcamp. I remember hearing Dad on the phone bragging about it to Uncle Ray. "We've got a future tech entrepreneur on our hands. He's already building apps." I peeked into Mason's room that night and saw him watching YouTube videos and gaming on a brand new custom PC. When I asked about the bootcamp, he said, I skipped most of it. Too easy." I wanted to scream. Instead, I went back to Brew Haven, picked up a double shift, and told my manager I'd stay for the Friday rush. Senior year, I started another job at a used bookstore a few blocks from the cafe. The owner, Harold, was in his 70s and treated me like a granddaughter. He paid in small bills and let me take home damaged books for free. Sometimes he'd bring in donuts and say, "Ellie, you're gonna go far. Got the fight in you." At home, I told my parents I was doing it for experience. The truth. I needed money they wouldn't take. That winter, Mason got a new tablet to help him with school. When I asked Mom if I could sign up for after-school art club, she said, "We don't have time for your little hobbies. Focus on something useful." She didn't even look up from her phone. When I tried to show her a comic strip I'd been drawing, something I'd spent weeks on, she said, "I don't have the energy for this right now." Dad just asked, "Is there a reason you keep wasting printer ink?" I stopped printing anything. Eventually, they stopped asking about my jobs. They just expected the money. If I got off late, they complained I was never around for family dinner. If I forgot to vacuum or do laundry, they called me ungrateful. I was juggling school, 2 part-time jobs, and early college applications. I barely slept. I skipped prom to pick up an evening shift at Brew Haven. When I got home, I found Mason watching TV, eating Chinese takeout. My parents were out on a date night. He glanced at me and said, "You missed a call from Dad. He wanted to remind you rent's due." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't, I might break. I started eating at work more often, staying out later, studying in the stockroom just to avoid home. I didn't bring friends over anymore. It was too awkward when my parents said things like, "Ellie's our little breadwinner," while handing Mason a brand new phone. He stopped being my brother and started parroting them. "You know, I could probably make twice what you make if I got a job," he said once. "But Dad says I should focus on real SK*LLS, not steaming milk." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Art became the only place I felt safe. I filled notebook after notebook with scenes of freedom. People moving into new apartments, women sitting on roofs at sunset, someone holding a set of keys and smiling. I kept them hidden behind my dresser. And I told myself every single day that I wasn't staying here forever. That I'd never ask my parents for a dime. That one day, I'd open my own door, walk into a space that was mine, and never, ever let anyone make me feel like I owed them for existing. By the time I turned 17, I had 2 part-time jobs, a 3.8 GPA, and a drawer full of acceptance letters from community colleges and in-state universities. I was tired, but I felt okay. Not happy, not safe, but focused. Like I had a mission. My parents, however, were unimpressed. This one's only a state school? Dad said, flipping through my admissions packets. Don't expect us to co-sign anything unless it's something that actually pays off. You'll probably end up dropping out to draw cartoons anyway, Mom added, sipping her tea. I didn't argue. I'd stopped arguing. Instead, I quietly accepted a spot at Spokane Arts and Tech College, where I could major in graphic design. It wasn't flashy, but it was affordable, and I'd already figured out how to pay for it. I applied for grants, filed FAFSA without parental support, and secured 2 scholarships from local businesses, one of which was a $1,000 essay prize I won for writing about financial independence. I never even told my parents I applied. It was the first thing I ever did completely alone, and it made me feel powerful. But as college started, the pressure at home only escalated. They began asking for more than 20%. Now it was a little extra to help with groceries, or chipping in for your brother's coding software. If I hesitated, Dad would give me that look, the one that meant, "You're lucky we haven't kicked you out." Mason, meanwhile, had become unrecognizable. At 16, he'd adopted Dad's sarcasm and Mom's cold shoulder like armor. He used to be my shadow, my backyard pirate co-captain, my blanket fort builder. Now he barely said more than move when passing me in the hall. Once, I forgot to unload the dishwasher before a shift, and when I got home, Mason looked up from his gaming chair and said, "You're such a freeloader. Honestly, you're lucky we don't take half your paycheck." I laughed in disbelief, and he turned back to his screen, muttering, "Whatever. Just don't mess up dinner. Mom's already pissed." At school, I kept my head down. Most kids my age had help. From parents, from savings, from stability. I had a cracked phone, a 15-year-old Toyota I bought from my bookstore boss for $400, and a budget so tight it squeaked. I made my own lunches, skipped out on parties, and never joined clubs because I was always working. Sometimes I'd sit in the car before class, just breathing, telling myself to keep going, that this version of life was temporary. But the isolation clawed at me. One afternoon, I tried to reconnect with my old friend Mariah. She'd just gotten into UW and invited me to grab coffee. We sat in the back of Brew Haven, where I used to work, and caught up. She laughed about dorm drama and roommates stealing her almond milk, then asked, "So, how's your family?" The words stuck in my throat. I nodded, smiled, lied. Busy, but fine. I didn't tell her about how Mom had recently called me a burden for needing a flu *T, or how Dad had accused me of hiding money just because I refused to give him a loan for car repairs. I didn't mention how they'd canceled our internet for 2 weeks as punishment after I refused to give up another paycheck. I didn't say that my home felt like a war zone with doilies. Instead, I said, just focused on school. That night, I opened my phone to text Mariah a thank you. The screen blinked, number blocked. Confused, I checked my settings. Not blocked by her. Blocked by someone else. I realized, slowly, that my phone had been messed with. My call logs deleted. My Wi-Fi settings scrambled. I knew Mason had access to it. I'd left it charging in the kitchen the night before. When I asked him directly, he didn't deny it. Just shrugged and said, "Should have had better security. Maybe try drawing a firewall next time." I wanted to scream. I didn't. I never did. I went back to school and focused harder. I picked up shifts at the bookstore and cleaned out the back room for a bonus. I sold a few art commissions on Etsy, started building a digital portfolio. All while hiding every cent in my secret credit union account, now nearing $10,000. Home was unbearable. Conversations were replaced by passive-aggressive notes. "Clean up your mess, not your studio." "You want heat this winter? Start contributing more. Your brother's future matters. Stop being selfish." I started staying late on campus, sleeping in the library sometimes. My professors began noticing. One, Ms. Daniels, offered me a ride home after seeing me nodding off at my desk. I declined. How could I explain that home wasn't really home? That I lived in a place where my worth was transactional, where love came with invoices. That no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough? Then came the final straw. I overheard Mom on the phone with a friend, talking about Mason's upcoming senior project. "We're thinking of taking out a small loan," she said. "It's for his future. Ellie's working. She can help cover it. She doesn't need college the way he does." I stood frozen outside the door. She didn't know I was there. She wasn't being cruel. She was being honest, in the way you only are when you think no one's listening. That night, I packed up 2 duffel bags, clothes, sketchbooks, my laptop, and the small ceramic owl Tara had given me as a gift when I helped her with her college essay. I didn't say goodbye. I crashed on a classmate's couch for 2 weeks until I found a room to rent near campus. It was tiny, drafty, and smelled like moldy carpet, but it was quiet. It was mine. I hung up my favorite mural print and painted the windowsill yellow. No more passive-aggressive sticky notes. No more cash demands. No more erasure. And still, I never asked them for a dime. Not once. Because I knew now, they wouldn't offer it without strings. They never had. And I was finally learning how to cut those strings before they strangled me. At 24, I bought a house. Not a mansion. Not a downtown condo with skyline views. Just a little 2-bedroom cottage on the north side of Spokane, with peeling blue shutters, a wobbly porch swing, and a backyard full of dandelions. But it was mine. No co-signer. No gifts. No helpful contributions. Just me, my savings, my Federal Credit Union mortgage, and a loan I'd worked my butt off to qualify for. When I signed the paperwork, I cried in the parking lot of the title office. Cried harder when I held the key. I wasn't supposed to get here. Not by their standards. Not without Mason's real SK*LLS. But I did it. I invited exactly 3 people over to celebrate. My co-worker Tara from Brew Haven, Mia from school, and Harold from the bookstore. We sat on the floor eating cheap pizza and toasted with gas station champagne. Tara drew a mustache on my sold sign with permanent marker. It was perfect. 2 months later, I was served with legal papers. I thought it was a mistake at first, some error in county records, a misfiled notice. But when I flipped open the manila envelope and read the first page, my heart stopped. Plaintiffs: Susan and Greg Reynolds. Defendant: Ellie Reynolds. Amount in dispute: $130,000. They were suing me, their own daughter. The claim: that I had financially benefited from parental support, unpaid housing, and diverted funds originally intended for the family, and that I owed them 60% of the market value of my new home as compensation. I laughed at first. An ugly, breathless sound that didn't feel real. Then I called the number listed on the paperwork, their attorney. And yes, it was real. Signed. Filed. Certified. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen, the laminate counter cool against my fingers as I gripped the edge to keep from collapsing. They hadn't spoken to me in over a year. Not a text. Not an email. The last words I heard from my father were, "Don't come back unless you're ready to be part of this family." Now they wanted my house. They didn't say anything directly. No call. No message. Just a legal knife slipped between my ribs. I showed the papers to Tara the next day. She read the whole thing in silence, then said, "They think you're still afraid of them." She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't that same girl anymore. Tara had been with me since the cafe days. She knew everything: how I saved in secret, the fake rent I paid at 17, how I hid my sketchbooks in the laundry basket to keep them from being thrown out. She also knew something else. "My uncle used to hoard junk in their attic," she said one night, flipping through her phone. "He had files going back decades. I helped clean it after he died. Want to see what your parents left behind?" I didn't expect anything serious. Maybe some receipts. Maybe nothing. But when we climbed into the attic of my parents' old house, now vacant while they claimed to be downsizing, Tara found something I never could have imagined. A plastic bin labeled Taxes/Insurance 2017 to 2021. Inside, old bills, envelopes, and a USB stick in a cracked case. I pocketed the drive and we left fast. My hands shook the whole way home. That night, I plugged it into Tara's laptop. Inside were folders, dozens of PDFs, bank transfers, wire instructions, a spreadsheet with highlighted cells labeled BET funnel, and Mason cover. I clicked a transaction labeled ERBB Reno and opened a digital receipt for a $5,000 transfer made from my Brew Haven pay stubs into a shared family account, which was then used at a site linked to an offshore betting platform. I found another file, a draft email to Mason from Dad's account, titled Startup Fallback Plan. It read, "If Ellie ever gets something big in her name, we have enough to leverage. No guilt, we raised her. No guilt. We raised her." I wanted to throw up. They'd been funneling my contributions, every rent payment, every help with groceries deduction, into a damn gambling ring. And now that I had something tangible, something they didn't control, they were trying to take it back. And Mason? He was included in the plan. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. All those times he mocked me for steaming milk. All those jokes about, lucky we don't take more. He knew. Or at least suspected. They used me as a fallback. A plan B. And now, they wanted a payout. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Instead, I called Mia, who was finishing paralegal training. I told her everything. She didn't even pause. "You need a lawyer. Fast. Someone who actually fights for women like you. I know someone." Her name was Jenna, a non-profit defense attorney with a soft voice and a spine of iron. I sent her everything, the lawsuit, the USB files, the account numbers. She called me the next day. "This isn't just civil. This is fraud. Possibly criminal conspiracy." I felt numb. They weren't just cruel. They were criminals. I had to make a choice. Fight and risk losing everything. My savings, my home, my peace, or roll over and let them win. Again. Jenna didn't mince words. If they're willing to lie on paper, they're willing to escalate. She was right. That weekend, I got an anonymous letter in my mailbox. "You're unstable. Someone like you shouldn't own property." Imagine what would happen if the wrong people found out. "Maybe the court should know about your history." It wasn't signed. But I knew my mother's phrasing. I knew Dad's passive-aggressive cruelty. And I knew Mason's talent for digital manipulation. They were threatening to frame me. To push the idea I was mentally unfit. To tear away the only thing I'd earned without them. They were playing dirty. But this time, so was I. Jenna moved fast. Within 48 hours, she filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, citing lack of standing and fraudulent intent. She also submitted a preliminary injunction request to freeze any actions my parents might take to influence property ownership until we went to court. Her words, "We're not just defending you. We're setting a trap." The USB stick was our smoking G*N. But we needed more. Documentation. Witnesses. A digital trail to show how deep the manipulation went. And if possible, public leverage. Because if my parents were willing to smear me as unstable, they were likely doing the same to cover their own tracks. That's where Tara came in. "Remember that encrypted drive I told you about?" she said, tossing a battered laptop on my dining table. "I've been backing up my old security footage and tech logs from Brew Haven. One of those days when your dad stormed in to yell about your attitude? I recorded it. Might still be in the archives." I stared at her. "You recorded my dad?" He creeped me out. Always talking to me like I was a waitress in his dream, not your coworker. Figured if he ever pulled anything, I'd have proof. I hugged her like my life depended on it. Because at that moment, it kind of did. We found the clip 2 hours later. A grainy video from the cafe's back hallway, my dad cornering me by the break room door. His voice clear as glass. "Don't forget whose roof you lived under for 18 years. A little gratitude goes a long way, Ellie. Remember that." We downloaded the file, timestamp and all. Mia, who was in her last semester of paralegal training, joined us that night. We set up shop at my dining table. Sticky notes, timeline spreadsheets, cross-reference transactions. Tara brewed coffee like we were prepping for a final exam in vengeance. Mia pulled up county real estate records and noticed something strange. Your parents refinanced their mortgage the same week you made your house deposit, she said, scrolling. And look at this, 2 large wire transfers from their account to a third-party shell labeled as educational consulting. But there's no consulting firm registered at that address. She raised an eyebrow. Wanna bet that's a laundering channel for the betting scheme? I stared at the screen. You really think they're still active? Mia nodded. And I think they're using your lawsuit to cover up their losses. Everything clicked into place. My parents weren't just angry I had a house. They needed money. Desperately. And they saw me, the daughter they dismissed, insulted, squeezed dry, as a convenient solution. I wasn't going to let that happen. But we couldn't just show up in court and expect a win. Jenna was right. We needed to make this public. And we needed the timing to hurt them more than it hurt me. That's when Tara said, "What if we go nuclear at the expo?" I blinked. What expo? Mason's startup showcase. It's in Portland next month. Big stage, live streamed, sponsors, investors. He's presenting his new app. Your parents will be there, guaranteed. I hesitated. That's his thing. I don't want to drag him. No, Tara snapped. He's part of this. Even if he didn't write the lawsuit, he's benefiting from the same toxic system. He's not a bystander, Ellie. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my house, my peace, my life back. But I also knew, silence hadn't protected me before. It wouldn't now. So we made a plan. Jenna worked the legal angles. Mia tracked financial documents and digital evidence. Tara secured an invite to the expo under her cousin's design firm. I reached out to a local tech blogger, Nora Lynn, whose exposés on corruption had blown up before. She agreed to sit on the story, if we delivered everything with full verification. It felt like building a bomb. Every night after work, we huddled over laptops, piecing together transactions, downloading old emails, collecting every voicemail and message I'd ever gotten from my parents asking for money, especially the ones that hinted at expectation and investment. The most chilling? One from my mom. Mason's success is our retirement. You knew that. Don't sabotage it just because you're playing adult. The morning of the expo, I barely slept. I wore a violet dress borrowed from Tara. Jenna pressed a folder into my hands, the master file, printed and ready, with a summary statement I'd need if police were involved. If they retaliate today, you stay silent. Let the documents speak. And let me do the talking, she said. I nodded. My hands were trembling. As we drove to Portland, Tara played calming piano music from her playlist. You're not just fighting back, she said. You're breaking the chain. The venue was massive. Glass walls, rows of folding chairs, lights and screens everywhere. Mason's face was plastered on a banner near the main stage. Innovate now, meet the future of tech. It made my stomach turn. We slipped in through the back with event passes printed under fake names. Tara scoped out the AV booth, whispering to one of the interns she knew from a mutual friend. 10 minutes later, she had access to the live stream switchboard. Mia prepped the screen overlays and uploaded the files. All that was left was timing. When Mason stepped onto the stage and started his demo, I felt the whole room shift. Applause. Cameras. Excitement. He looked polished, tailored navy suit, confident smile, a rehearsed voice that said, "We're building something bigger than apps. We're building digital trust." That word, trust, almost made me laugh. Tara gave me a nod. I reached for my phone and texted Jenna one word. Now. The moment I hit send, time slowed. My thumb trembled as the message left my phone. Now. 30 seconds later, the lights dimmed slightly, flickering just enough to draw confused murmurs from the audience. Mason, mid-pitch, faltered but kept going, walking confidently across the stage like he owned the building. With your investment, we're not just developing a platform, we're redefining digital integrity. I almost laughed. Tara was already at the AV booth, fingers dancing over the control keys. Mia gave me a discreet thumbs up. Jenna stood near the press area, folder in hand, eyes on Mason. Then the screen behind him glitched. And everything cracked open. At first, the audience thought it was part of the presentation. A sleek video of Mason's app interface shimmered on the giant projector. But then, without warning, it flickered and cut to black. The next frame showed a PDF, a bank transfer with my dad's name, my account routing number, and the label Ellie Rent Allocation, Redline Sports Betting. Gasps. Mason turned, confused. Can we switch that back?" he said, his voice tight with forced humor. Too late. Tara cued the next slide, An email from Greg Reynolds to Susan Reynolds titled Leverage Strategy, with lines highlighted in bold. Once Ellie has assets, we hit her. She won't have the stomach to fight it. File as early as possible after closing, before she moves funds. If she resists, press the mental health angle. The room fell dead silent. A full-screen video played next, the Brew Haven security footage. Dad cornering me by the break room. Don't forget whose roof you lived under. A little gratitude goes a long way. People murmured. One woman in the front row stood up, visibly shaken. Another man whispered into his phone, presumably a journalist. Mason turned pale. Turn it off, he hissed toward the AV booth. This is a hack. This is fake. But he didn't look convinced. Then came the final blow, a recorded voicemail from Mom, crackling but clear through the speaker system. Mason's success is our retirement. You knew that. Don't sabotage it just because you're playing adult. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one moved. Not Mason. Not the audience. Not even the staff. Then chaos. Dozens of phones were raised. Flashbulbs. Yells. People shouting questions at Mason, who stood frozen on stage, mouth slightly open, hands shaking. This is out of context, he barked. This is personal. This is illegal. Jenna stepped forward, her press badge flashing. It's not illegal if it's your victim defending herself in court, she said calmly. Then she turned to the crowd. My name is Jenna Hollis. I represent Ellie Reynolds, the legal owner of the property her parents are currently attempting to seize through fraudulent claims. What you've just seen are authenticated documents and audio files collected over the course of a 6-week investigation. The evidence has been submitted to the Spokane Police Department and the IRS. Someone clapped. One person. Then 2. Then 10. Within seconds, half the auditorium was applauding. Not wildly, but firmly. Supportively. Like they knew a line had been crossed and weren't going to pretend otherwise. Mason jumped down from the stage and stormed toward the side exit, only to be intercepted by 2 uniformed officers. Not for him, yet, but to escort Jenna and me to a secure area. We followed without resistance. I glanced back once. He met my eyes. And for the first time, I didn't see arrogance. I saw fear. Backstage, Jenna turned to me. Your parents filed the case assuming no one would believe you. Now the whole city's watching. They don't get to erase your story anymore. 10 minutes later, the press started calling. First Nora Lynn, the local tech blogger who'd agreed to sit on the story. She was already writing. Then Spokane Weekly. Then Channel 7. Mia whispered, "You're going viral." Tara burst into tears. I just stood there, vibrating. That afternoon, Spokane PD issued a subpoena for my parents' financial records. Jenna filed a formal fraud complaint with the Attorney General's office. An emergency hearing was scheduled to review the suit, now stained by public exposure and mounting digital evidence. 3 days later, the judge threw the lawsuit out. But it didn't end there. IRS investigators opened a case into the offshore accounts listed in the USB documents. Turns out, my parents had been dodging taxes for years using a shell company in Belize. The same one they tried to hide my contributions through. They were slapped with felony-level charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, tax evasion, and attempted extortion. They hired a lawyer. Then another. Then tried to settle. Jenna rejected every offer. Mason, meanwhile, went silent online. His startup's website went dark. Sponsors pulled funding within 72 hours of the Expo debacle. Investors fled. The media picked it up, and soon, his name was trending, not for innovation, but for complicity. He emailed me once. I didn't know about all of it. Only some. I thought they were just protecting me. I didn't think they'd go after you like that. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Because some is enough. Knowing some and doing nothing is complicity. He knew I was being used. And he stayed silent. Until I wasn't useful anymore. That week, I sat on the floor of my little cottage and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I was broken, but because I'd survived something that should have shattered me. And I still had my house. My name still on the deed. My plants still in the windows. My art still on the walls. Tara came over with cupcakes. Mia brought sparkling cider. Jenna lit a candle and said, "To taking our power back." We toasted. Not with triumph, but with relief. I looked around my small living room, still scattered with notebooks and court folders and coffee mugs, and for the first time, I breathed without fear. I had no parents, no brother, no fake promises of family. But I had a roof. I had my story. I had myself. And that was more than enough. The court threw the lawsuit out on a rainy Tuesday morning. The judge barely looked at my parents' lawyer as he read the verdict. Frivolous, manipulative, and deeply concerning, he said. This court finds the defendant owes nothing. In fact, she is the victim of sustained financial and psychological abuse. I felt a pressure in my chest collapse like a paper wall. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I just gripped Jenna's hand so tightly I probably left marks. Outside, the press swarmed, but I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Jenna made a short statement. Miss Reynolds will not be issuing comments today. Her story is clear, documented, and complete. What matters now is healing. Healing. I wasn't sure what that looked like yet, but I knew what freedom felt like. It felt like waking up the next morning and realizing no one could take my house away. No one could claim my safety, my peace, or my worth. It felt like opening the window and letting in the rain, because I wanted to, not because I had to keep watch. It felt like breathing fully, for the first time in years. My parents didn't go to jail, not officially. They took a plea deal, full financial restitution, community service, and 5 years probation under federal supervision. The IRS seized their remaining accounts, and their names were blacklisted from most lending institutions. Mason publicly distanced himself from them, issuing a bland, corporate statement about family mistakes and clarity moving forward. He never apologized again. I heard they moved into a rental trailer on the outskirts of town. No more 6-bedroom house. No more high-end espresso machines. Just silence. And finally, distance. They were gone. Out of my life. For good. I kept the house. It needed work. Still does. The roof leaks in the back corner during heavy snow. The water heater groans like it's possessed. The floorboards creak, and the porch light shorts out sometimes. But it's mine. No one else gets to dictate who lives here, what it looks like, or what kind of art hangs on the walls. I painted the hallway lemon yellow. Tara painted a mural of climbing wildflowers on the back fence. My bedroom is filled with plants and thrifted furniture, soft rugs and string lights. I started taking freelance design gigs full-time. I made enough to quit the bookstore and focus on building my own studio. Just a desk in the spare bedroom for now, but it's growing. Clients trust me. I've got a small following online. And people pay me for my vision. My taste. My eye. No one takes 20%. No one calls my sketchbooks a waste of money. I volunteer now too. Every Thursday, I teach financial literacy at a local teen shelter, the same one I once called from a school library payphone when I had nowhere to sleep for the night. I bring donuts, open my laptop, and show them how to open a checking account, how to budget, how to say no when someone tries to guilt-trip you for success. At the end of the first class, one girl, maybe 16, stayed behind. She had a purple streak in her hair and rings on every finger. She looked me in the eye and said, "They said I'd never make it without them. But you did, right?" I nodded. "Yeah. And you will too." I didn't realize I was crying until she hugged me. Mia graduated and got a job at a public advocacy firm. She still texts me memes and voice notes at 2 a.m., usually some mix of legal news and bad puns. Tara's mural business is booming. She's booked out for months and recently painted a children's wing in a hospital with bright sea creatures and dancing clouds. Jenna became one of my first paying clients. I designed a new logo for her firm, and she still refuses to let me invoice her. We built a group chat called The House That Ellie Built. It started as a place to vent about the lawsuit. Now it's a celebration space. New jobs, new plants, new sketches, new wins. We lift each other up. Not because we have to. Because we want to. One day, in a moment of quiet, I found myself back in the attic. Not the one at my parents' house, but my own. I'd avoided it since moving in. The insulation still smelled dusty. The single bulb flickered like a horror movie setup. But I pulled down the ladder, climbed up, and sat in the silence. I opened my sketchbook. Drew the house from memory, every cracked shingle, every crooked shutter. Then I drew myself, standing on the porch. Not smiling. Just standing tall. Present. Unmoved. Real. This house, this life, wasn't handed to me. It wasn't sponsored. It wasn't protected by privilege or promised by birthright. I fought for it. Bled for it. Scratched it from the ground with bare hands and a paper paycheck. And I never asked my parents for a dime. They tried to tell me I owed them my future. Now, I'm building a scholarship fund in spite of them. I call it Second Key, for kids like me. For teens who couch hop through school, who work 3 jobs just to hear their parents say, not enough. For every young woman who's ever been told, you're not the priority. It's small for now, just a few hundred a month, funded by my art commissions and Etsy sales. But I'm working on a site, spreading the word. And when it's big enough, when it really grows, I'll add 1 sentence to every welcome packet. You don't owe anyone for simply existing. My story isn't a tragedy. It's a blueprint. And my home. It's not a trophy. It's the beginning.